Hello, I'm Tara Reamer, President and CEO of the Alaska SeaLife Center. The center is a nonprofit organization located on the shores of beautiful Resurrection Bay in downtown Seward, Alaska. We've been here for going on 25 years as the only public aquarium in Alaska. But in addition to that, we are also a marine science research facility, do education and wildlife response. I am so excited to welcome you here today because I, like many of you, love Viking ocean cruises. I've only done one so far, but I have several on my bucket list coming up. Seward, Alaska and the Alaska SeaLife Center as the shore excursion are included on a number of Viking cruises in Alaska, including the Alaska and the Southeast Passage cruise and the North Pacific Passage that brings the ship to and from Alaska from Japan at the beginning and the end of the season. So we're going to show you around the SeaLife Center, and then at the end of this video, you will have some opportunity for a live Q&A session with two of our amazing animal care staff. You will be meeting Lisa Hartman, our husbandry director, and Dr. Carrie Goertz, our director of animal health. The mission of the Alaska SeaLife Center is to generate and share scientific knowledge to promote understanding and stewardship of Alaska's marine ecosystem. We do this mission in three different ways: marine science research, education, and wildlife response. The goal of our research program is to develop an understanding of the role of marine mammals, birds, and fish in the Arctic and subarctic marine ecosystems, and to generate scientific knowledge relevant to resource management and policy. Our projects focus on Alaska marine life and environments, but reach globally with international collaborations. The center's unique geographic location, marine cold water research facilities, live animal collections, and specialized staff allows us to use a combination of experimental and field research to understand Alaska's marine wildlife. We use marine mammals, seabirds, and fish as windows into the ecosystem they inhabit. As the Arctic and subarctic are undergoing rapid environmental changes, understanding responses of these species to change is becoming urgently more important. Now we'll show you a little more about a few of our research projects.
I'm part of the seabird research team here at the Alaska SeaLife Center. We monitor about 44 kilometers of the nearshore coastline outside of Seward, and we are counting and observing all seabirds, sea ducks, and other birds that occur in the nearshore waters. Today we're conducting our June seabird survey, and we're picking up a lot of the breeding birds that arrive for their breeding season. So we're seeing a lot of marbled murrelets, pigeon guillemots, black-legged kittiwakes.
Kittiwake, 2 adult, flying inside under.
This is an important year-round project, as it is the only year-round seabird survey in Alaskan waters. It's a really important tool to be able to monitor if there's any potential changes or anything outside of what we would consider normal. Since we started this survey in 2011, we've observed over 60 species of birds and counted over 100,000 individuals.
I've been studying stellar sea lions for about 20 years now here, and we've been studying through this remote video system based on Chiswell Island, about 35 miles south of Seward. And it's really important to conduct these long-term studies like this because we learn so much more than you would understand by just studying them for a year or two. The old video system has been great. It's worked great for quite a long time, but the equipment has degraded over time. It's based on old, outdated analog technology. The old equipment has been rusted in place. Took a lot of effort to remove, but we finally got it out. We've just recently received funding to install this new digital video system, new digital antennas, new digital cameras, and it's been fantastic. We're very enthusiastic about where this is going, and we'll be able to learn so much more moving into the future in this long-term study, looking at these endangered species and where this population is going.
We're interested in using mussels to determine how the coastal environment is changing. They're filter feeders, so they concentrate what's in the water. So they're a great thing to look at to see what's going on in the environment. Is it responding to a contaminant in the environment? Is it responding to environmental changes like changing water temperatures or nutrient conditions? And we need some good baseline data from the lab to help us understand what we see in the field.
I'm Assistant Katrina with the Mussel Project. We are looking at 3 different exposures. They are nutrient levels, oil exposure, and temperature. First, in order to conduct this experiment, we had to collect mussels. So we collected mussels in the bay about a mile from the SeaLife Center. We brought them back to the center and we waited for a time for them to purge and acclimate so that all of the mussels would be under the same conditions for these experiments.
So in this tank we have our control, so it's just seawater. In this tank we have 1 part per million of crude oil, and this tank is 10 parts per million crude oil. And the reason why we chose those concentrations is that 10 parts per million has been measured in the ocean after an oil spill. So that's a realistic amount of oil that an animal might encounter. If there's an oil spill, we can sample mussels and we can see what they're responding to, because sometimes it's hard to actually see the oil in the environment, especially at really low concentrations. But we can see a signature in the mussels themselves, so we can monitor the ecosystem for recovery.
Education programs at the Alaska SeaLife Center foster ocean literacy and stewardship by connecting people of all ages to Alaska's marine ecosystems in meaningful ways. We invite visitors to the center to gain a deeper understanding of marine science through the process of discovery. Most of our student programs in the past have been on-site at the center, including a very popular overnight program for classes. However, we have always had virtual programs that we could deliver around the world. Now we find ourselves only delivering virtual programs, and we'd like to show you some of those.
You can now visit the Alaska SeaLife Center virtually. Stay connected with your favorite animals and discover something new through our interactive programs. We offer STEM-based virtual experiences for all ages, led by our award-winning education team. Learn more and sign up online today at alaskasealife.org. See you soon!
Distance learning is live interactive video conferencing, and the primary goal is to be able to reach out to an audience that is not able to be physically present here at the Alaska SeaLife Center. Distance learning can be geared toward any audience, really. We've had some homeschool groups, or we've had a lot of primary and secondary classrooms. We've also had senior centers and assisted living facilities. One of the classes that we offer is marine mammal adaptations. And what that is we observe the mammals live if possible in the tanks, but of course, because we can't guarantee what the mammals will be doing, we've always got recorded video. We'll look for specific behaviors so that the students can really appreciate the adaptations that the animals have and how that helps them survive here in Alaska. And then the students will have the opportunity to answer our questions as we go along. They'll also have the chance to ask us questions. We will send out materials for the class ahead of time. So for marine mammal adaptations, we send out clay seal kits for every student, and the teacher gets a box of those, and all they have to do is open up that box, hand them out to the kids, and we'll lead them through the process of making the clay seals while we're online. Just roll it into a little ball and stick it right on the end of your seal's snout to make the nose.
The Alaska SeaLife Center Wildlife Response Program responds to marine wildlife that has been abandoned, stranded, or injured throughout Alaska. The center is the only institution authorized to rehabilitate live stranded marine mammals in the state of Alaska. We operate under permits and agreements issued by the United States federal government. The main goal of the Wildlife Response Program is to learn from these animals to better understand wild populations and to maintain capacity to respond to natural or man-made disasters. When possible, we return healthy animals to the wild. Now we'd like to share some stories of some of our recent wildlife response patients.
Nice job. I'm Savannah, and I am an animal care specialist here at the SeaLife Center, who primarily works out of our wildlife response program. Nice job, Bishop. One of our common patients are sick and abandoned sea otter cubs. When they come in, they have really intensive hands-on care. Every couple of hours, we're doing a bottle feed, giving them any medications. We are checking their blood glucose, their temperature, administering sub-Q fluids, as well as spending anywhere from 30 to an hour and a half grooming their coats.
Once they kind of graduate, become stronger and healthier, they do kind of switch over to mammal care, and that is the department that I mainly work in. Good boy. Nice job, buddy. As they start to progress through their care and become stronger and healthier, we do eventually move them out to different enclosures and start to socialize them with different otters.
So I have in front of me a bearded seal. Her name is Siktulik, and she's named after the village she came from. When Siktulik was first found on the beach, she was only 20 kilograms. That's only about 40 pounds. When a bearded seal is born, they're usually around 50 pounds to 70 pounds. So she was a very skinny animal. We now have a 68 kilogram animal, so she's around 130 pounds. And now that she's bigger, we have moved her to the ICU pool. Currently, we are giving her about 2 liters of formula 5 times a day. It's a special bearded seal formula we made, which is a combination of recipes that we use for harbor seals and for walrus.
Now that you've learned about our research, education, and wildlife response, let's take a look around the center to see our facility and meet some of our staff and animals. Your visit at the Alaska SeaLife Center will begin at the top of the stairs. One of my favorite exhibits is right up front, Harbor Bottom. Here you'll see fish and invertebrates hiding in areas and objects that you might find at the bottom of a harbor. Going further through the center, you will come to what we call our Rocky Coast Gallery, our 3 major animal habitats. The aviary is the favorite for many of our visitors. You'll be able to see a number of Alaska seabirds up close, including the fan favorite puffins. In our stellar sea lion exhibit, you could see some of the young animals born at the center or some of the older animals that might be their parents. Stellar sea lions are the largest sea lion in the world, and they are impressive, especially when eating whole salmon. Our final animal habitat is where we have some of our ice seals. Currently, ringed seals and spotted seals inhabit this location. The Alaska SeaLife Center is one of the few places to hold any type of ice seal and is the only place in North America where you can see ringed seals. Near our new touch tank is viewing windows for our ICU. The ICU is an area that we can take care of a large variety of animals, typically some of our wildlife response patients. Continuing through the center, you'll find our microhabitats. These house some of my favorite fish and invertebrates, some that you need to stare at the tank for quite a while until you'll actually see them. Continuing on, you'll see our salmon exhibit. Everyone that visits Alaska has to try some salmon, and you'll learn about all the types of species of the salmon found in Alaska. Don't forget to stop at our outdoor viewing deck, especially if the weather is good. Going downstairs, you will enter underwater viewing. The lights are a bit lower, just like it is a little bit darker under the water. Here you'll see the same 3 habitats that you visited upstairs, but with a completely different perspective. Stop by and wave at our seals underwater. They might actually trace circles if you move your hand around and around. Our stellar sea lions may just be lounging around upstairs, but if you're lucky enough to see them swimming downstairs, you will be amazed at how quickly and effortlessly they glide through the water. don't forget to pop into the Octo Grotto. You'll meet one of our giant Pacific octopus. Some of the aquariums and underwater viewing highlight some animals you might not see very often. The seabird exhibit from underwater is absolutely amazing to watch. The puffins and other seabirds fly through the water to catch fish. It's always great to catch this exhibit at feeding time. Now you'll have to pull yourself out from underwater viewing, but I sure hope you have visited some of the interactive signage. You can compare your weight to that of a puffin or a sea lion. And right before the exit, my favorite, okay, they're all my favorite, moon jellies. This type of jelly is found in Resurrection Bay frequently, and this tank will allow you to see how they move effortlessly through the water. Now that you've had an overview of what our visitor space looks like, let's meet some of our staff and animals.
This is a giant Pacific octopus named Wrangle. I think octopus are the most fascinating creatures of them all. Its brain only makes up 1/3 of all of its nerve cells, and 2/3 of it is distributed equally between its 8 arms. So most of its brain is actually incorporated into moving 1,500 to 2,000 sucker discs. And they can all taste, they can all individually move and suck with different amount of pressure. And so it takes a lot to compete in, which makes sense why most of its brain is actually in its arms. Growing up, I've always liked taking care of animals. And it's this kind of compassion I have for underdogs that kind of helped me realize how beautiful all animals are.
I am about to take out our Harlequin duckling, and this is our duckling tote, so I'm going to take him out and then we're going to be moving him into a bigger pool out in our holding space in the back. So Harlequin ducklings are known to be jumpers, so we want to make sure that we have this netting over it so that the duckling can't get out. All right, here's a little duckling. This chick was actually born about 2.5 weeks ago. Baby, you're okay. My favorite thing about the SeaLife Center and working here is that every year I get to care for little chicks. So we get to see them grow up and take care of them while they're growing. I picked this job because I really like working with animals. I like to see life from a different perspective, and I think that you really get that when you're working with animals.
So Tunu is one of my favorite animals to work with because I've actually known him almost his entire life. He was rescued and rehabilitated here at the center back in 2010. After clearing that phase of quarantine, he was actually transported to Santa Cruz at Long Marine Lab, where I was actually a volunteer at the time. So I worked with him through his first couple years of being a young pup. And then I actually got hired here back in 2014, and he came up shortly after, and then he kind of followed me. So Tunu and I have been pretty bonded since the beginning. Good. Cool. Been working on all sorts of different behaviors with him. This is what we call a roll, in which you can see the entire ventral side of the animal's body. Really just checking out to make sure everything looks nice and healthy. Good job, buddy. Good. Come. Open. We can also look inside our animals' mouths, check out their teeth. Very important for dental health. Tunu is also trained to get his teeth brushed. Also some nice light tactile, make sure that everything looks pretty normal inside the mouth as well. Good.
I've been an aquarist here at the Alaska SeaLife Center for almost 10 years at this point, and every day is a little bit different. I've never had 2 days that are the same, and that's one of the things I love the most about this job. Many of the fish and invertebrates in our collection we actually raise here at the SeaLife Center. These are prow fish, and today I am feeding them. They get fed every single day, and a big part of my job is to not just feed them, but to actually grow the food in the form of adult brine shrimp. And that's what's going on in these green cylinders behind me. So these prow fish are about 3 months old at this point, and they've easily quadrupled in size from when they hatched out, but they have a long way to go before reaching the size of their parents, of the adults. Looking fat and happy.
And Forrest is one of my favorite animals here at the center because I've been here since day one, since he was born. Good. Good. And the advantages of that is that I have gotten to create a relationship with Forrest. Good. From his first year of life. And so that's one of my favorite things here at the SeaLife Center is the relationships that we build with our animals and creating that positive relationship which allows us to take care of them in the best manner as possible. And so doing high energy behaviors, lifting up his flippers, good. Let me know that everything's working right. For if one day, you know, if Forrest can't lift his flipper up as high, good, or he's not able to stand up on the wall, I know I need to investigate a little bit further to see what's going on. Good. And then I can use my training that we've developed through his lifetime to take voluntary x-rays and do that cooperative behavior as well to give him the proper care that he needs to manage any issues that he does have. Very good. Good. Open. Good.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It was a joy to show you through the Alaska SeaLife Center virtually. We hope in the future you have a chance to visit Seward and the Alaska SeaLife Center on a Viking cruise. Now stay tuned. Your live questions will be answered by Dr. Carrie Goertz and Lisa Hartman in our Q&A session, so stick around. Thanks so much. Hello, this is Tara Reamer again. Thanks for joining us for this live Q&A with Dr. Carrie Goertz and Lisa Hartman. I'll be asking them your questions, so please continue to send those in online. Carrie, can you just give a brief introduction of yourself?
Hi, Carrie Goertz. I'm the Director of Animal Health here at the Alaska SeaLife Center. I've been here for over 15 years, and I've previously worked in aquaria in the lower 48.
Lisa.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Lisa Hartman. I'm the Husbandry Director here at the SeaLife Center. I started here in 1998, just before we opened the doors to the public as a marine mammal trainer, and just have continued to work in the husbandry department and currently hold the position of director.
Great. Well, I have the pleasure of transferring some of these questions through, and I encourage everyone to keep asking questions, and we'll be trying to answer as many as we can. So the first question is from Stephen in the UK. What is the apex predator in the seas of Alaska? Lisa, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I would say the apex predator that we see up here most frequently is the orca whale. They're pretty much the most dominant over any of the other marine mammals and just fish in the ocean. So yeah, I would say that is our apex predator up here.
Thanks, Lisa. We've got a question from Stephen from Las Vegas, Nevada. Are rehabbed animals released back into the wild? Carrie.
So it depends on the species and their circumstances, but harbor seals, for the most part, we are able to rehabilitate them and release them. Some other species like sea otters and walrus, they come to us at a very young age, and they have very long maternal dependent periods during which time mom is teaching them all sorts of things about how to be the best sea otter or walrus and learn to use the environment. Unfortunately, we can't replicate that, and so those animals do wind up getting placed in long-term homes. And then there are often a number of other issues, some medical, some other issues which preclude the release of all animals, but we do our best with those that are able to return to get them back to health and return them within a few months.
Thanks, Carrie. I'm going to take an easy one from Norman in Orlando. What is the average temperature in June? And so for Seward, Alaska, where we are, the average high in June is 59 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 15 degrees Celsius. So we consider a 60-degree day a really, really nice summer day. Thanks for that question. So a question from Geraldine in the United States. How many animals in total do you have at the Alaska SeaLife Center and how many staff? Lisa, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So we currently have 15 marine mammals in our collection. We have 5 stellar sea lions, a variety of ice seals, which are made up by ring seals and spotted seals. And then we have currently have 3 northern sea otters that just came out of our rehab program that are awaiting transport to their new home. And then we have roughly about 145 birds split between just some alcids and marine shorebirds and seabirds, and then some Arctic waterfowl, some spectacled and stellar eiders. And then we have almost 4,000 individual species between fish and inverts. So we have quite a range of all indigenous to the Gulf of Alaska, North Pacific waters. And we have currently, I believe we have around 70 full-time staff in the entire building, not just animal care, but around 70 helping grease the wheels and keep this building operational.
All right, I've got a question from Barry in Sarasota, Florida. Are all of your animals indigenous to Alaska? Carrie, can you take that one?
Yes, actually, we just display animals from Alaska, and by and large, we've collected them even closer, or they've been born here at the facility.
And there's a question from Maida from Salt Lake City that I've actually wondered myself. Lisa, do you know why your field is called animal husbandry?
Actually, animal husbandry comes out of like the agricultural farming sort of industry. You hear a lot of that with people taking care of livestock and stuff, but it is just a general term for animal care, and it is spread into the aquarium world. We've kind of adopted that term as well.
And so the next question's about animal health. I'll give this one to Carrie from Christopher in Colchester. Is there an animal dentist on staff? If so, which animals receive dental care?
Well, we don't have a dentist per se. We do have our animal husbandry staff. They regularly brush our mammals' teeth, and depending upon how much buildup there is, we have upon occasion done what's called a full dental, using the same tools that a human dentist uses, as well as tools that small animal veterinarians use. We are actually starting to use those tools on a behavioral basis as well to scrape off any buildup. We tend not to see a whole lot of dental issues, fortunately, because we do have this proactive toothbrushing program and keep a real close eye on dental health.
And I'll just add to that as well that it's not uncommon to see some issues with walrus in zoo and aquaria with their tusks, and so that those tend to sometimes require a lot more dental intervention, and so facilities that hold walrus probably definitely consult a lot with veterinary dental specialists, or if they have to do any kind of work with walrus. So.
Thanks. The next one you both might want to speak with too as well. From Barry from Sarasota, have you ever successfully rehabilitated a whale?
Yeah.
Who wants to start?
Such a fun story for us to tell. Let you go, Carrie, first.
Okay. Well, we have taken in a couple of beluga calves, one of which did not make it, but one was successfully recovered from his presenting problems. He did have some long-term concerns, and also because he came to us at such a long age, again, we couldn't possibly teach him how to be a beluga out in the world, and so we did place him in a zoological facility.
And I'll just add that was a critically endangered Cook Inlet beluga, so it was we had a lot of collaboration with other zoological partners, with NOAA, and a lot of we followed a lot of lead from the government agencies on how we could work with this animal and what its long-term situation would be. But for us, I think what was so rewarding and gratifying in that whole process was not only that we successfully rehabilitated this baby beluga and is now thriving with it's kind of his own little pod, but just that collaborative effort of so many facilities that had experience with belugas that came and helped us for almost 6 months of taking care of this beluga up here. And so it was truly a rewarding and just a really neat experience to go through.
And I would like to just add a couple of things. So in terms of the decision that he was considered non-releasable and ultimately placed, that was actually NOAA's decision. But I mean, we all supported that. And just recently, actually, we've learned so much from this baby whale while he was under care here, and also continued to learn from him. And I guess it was 2 weeks ago, I just submitted a case report about him and the other beluga for publication. So that will be hopefully coming out later this year.
And just one final thing to clarify for everybody that might be listening, if you don't know what NOAA is not a person, not like NOAH, it's NOAA, and it's National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association. So just, it wasn't somebody NOAA sitting in an office making decisions for us.
I forgot.
Thanks, Lisa. I was going to say the same thing. So I've got a question from Forrest in the United States. He says that, do you realize people in Alaska are not overly friendly to outsiders and they consider everyone to be an outsider? Well, just want to explain the term outside when it comes to Alaskans. The term outside is any place that's not Alaska, and this is not a derogatory term at all. So someone who grew up in Alaska and is going to college elsewhere might say, I'm going to college outside. Or I lived outside for a while and I came back, or I'm going outside if you're going on a trip somewhere. But it's definitely, it's not a derogatory term at all. So just wanted to make sure that was clear. Got a question about dolphins. Carrie, why don't you take this one from Stephanie in Pasadena? I did not see any dolphins. Is that weather or migration driven?
Well, we typically do not see bottlenose dolphins all the way up here, but there are a number of cetacean species. Obviously, there's belugas, there's harbor porpoise, there are Dall's porpoises, commersons, I think is another one, in terms of the small ones. It may be in part just the ocean temperatures that they are used to being, like bottlenose dolphins are considered a more tropical or temperate relative to us. And so the waters are probably colder than they're used to, but also it may relate to their preferred prey species, that they are in the areas that they are because they've learned how to work with the prey species in that area.
Thanks. And a question, we'll put this one to Lisa. It's from Brett in San Antonio. How many new seals are born at the center each year?
So we don't have a very active breeding program here with our animals in-house. We did have a successful birth of a Steller sea lion pup this past summer, which was super exciting for us. Little baby Mist made her grand entrance in June. And we've had some harbor seal pups born here over the years, but most of the pup videos that you saw in the video that you just watched, most of those were our rehabilitation harbor seal pups that come in through our stranding program, generally in the summer during pupping season. So over the last 20 years, we have had several harbor seal pups and some sea lion pups born here, but it's not a regular occurrence.
And Lisa, to follow up on that, I've got a question from Lorna in the UK about what is the average lifespan of seal species in the wild, and maybe you could talk a little bit also about the difference between what it is in the wild versus what it is in a facility like ours.
Sure. So I'll speak to kind of stellar sea lions and harbor seals right now, and then we can move into some of the ice seal species. So stellar sea lions, general lifespan in the wild for the adult males is about roughly 12 to 15 years, and whereas in human care in a facility like ours, they could live into their early 20s. And the main difference for that is that in the wild, there are just a lot more avenues that could lead to death. Sea lions are very violent during the breeding season, which can lead to some pretty life-threatening injuries when they're defending their territories on the rookery. There's also just there's predation, there's disease, there's human interaction. So there's a lot of things that they face in the wild that they might not necessarily face when they're cared for here, when they're getting regular meals, they have medical care, and so their lifespan with us tends to be a little bit longer. The female sea lions, their lifespan in the wild is a little bit longer, probably their late teens, whereas out in the wild and in human care, early 20s is about the same. Harbor seals, they tend to have a little bit longer lifespan. I think there was a recent harbor seal that just passed away at an aquarium in Oregon that was 40, which is quite long-lived. Generally, mid-20s to 30s is about what they live in human care, and early 20s in the wild. We're just starting to learn more and more about ice seals. There have not been a lot of facilities that have held ring seals or spotted seals in human care for long periods of time, and we're just starting to learn about, all the data we've ever gotten from a lot of those species has been from just field studies, and so we're starting to learn a lot more longitudinal data on these animals, but their lifespan is roughly in the early 20s to late 20s for those guys as well.
Thank you. And Carrie, I've got a question from Jamie from Colchester. What is the largest bird that the center has assisted? Any bald eagles?
Actually, yes, we work with, we regularly encounter bald eagles. We don't do the long-term rehabilitation, but we certainly help pick up the birds locally, give some immediate care, and then we transfer them to a raptor rehab center up in Anchorage. The eels, we've had a couple of owls as well, but I think, yeah, eagles is the largest.
Yeah, and a couple swans. But.
Oh yes, swans. How could I forget? They're a handful. We've had also a young crane, which obviously can get quite large, but it was a youngster, and it too got transferred to a different facility for long-term rehab care.
So we've got a great question from Ricardo in Hungary that it might take a little while to talk about this one, but it's a really good one. How has global warming impacted the variety of native species in Alaska and their numbers? And I'm guessing both of you will have something to say about this. So let's start with Lisa, and you guys can just go back and forth as you want.
All right. Well, sounds great. Gosh, that is a great question, and we are certainly seeing the impacts up here particularly from reduced sea ice. We have a very dedicated project here looking at ice seals and their use of sea ice, and I'm actually going to let Carrie talk a little bit more about that particular project. But also, as we have been looking at walrus populations over the course of several years, we're seeing the reduced sea ice, which is a predominant haul out area for them, being reduced, is driving them onto beaches and further away from their normal feeding grounds. So it's having kind of a dual impact on those populations as they congregate and haul out more on beaches. They spook easier just from potentially human disturbances, air traffic, and it can lead to stampedes and a lot of the younger calves getting trampled. And also just leads to that they have to travel a lot further to foraging grounds. Generally, they're, on the years ago on the sea ice when they could just, dive down right, and on the particular area there where there's good substrate and clams, and now they're having to go a lot further. So definitely seeing how that is impacting, walrus habitat and walrus distribution. But I'll let Carrie talk a little bit more about the Focus project, which focuses on our ringed and spotted seals and a few bearded seals that are being looked at as well.
So, yep, those are all ice seals that Lisa was mentioning, and they, with the changing temperatures, it greatly impacts the sea ice, so there's less sea ice as in addition to the warmer temperatures. And the temperatures in Alaska and elsewhere in the Arctic are actually changing twice as fast, more than twice as fast than in the lower latitudes. And so the change is coming on faster and it's more profound. Some of the specific things that the research project is looking at in terms of the lack of sea ice and the changing temperatures is this changing what animals need, and in terms of food and resources, but also how is it impacting their ability to molt, and how does it change their metabolism? We also have another project that has looked at some of the changes that occur when with the melting ice pack, how that changes the salinity of the nearshore estuarine areas, and how it might impact the ability of, say, eiders to rear their chicks on areas that used to be a very different salinity. I'm trying to think what other projects we've got. I mean, it's definitely a major impact, and it's a focus of many of our research projects.
Great. Well, I'm going to go to an easier one. Do you have any crabs? If so, what kinds? Lisa.
Yes, we do have some crabs on display here. We have some Alaskan king crabs. We have both red and I think we had a few species of blue, and then we've also had some tanner crabs. We for a while had a Hanasaki crab, which was a really cool crab that we had for quite a while, but unfortunately we don't have that any longer. But it was just a really unique species with a lot of little protuberances on their claws. I don't know what they call those.
We have decorator crabs.
Oh, decorator crabs as well, yeah. And of course we have a lot of little hermit crabs in our aquarium areas and our touch pools and stuff that run around and stuff. But yeah, the decorator crab is also a really unique crab that is really fun to try to find in a lot of the exhibits, because they hide so well and are so camouflaged with a lot of things in their environment. I think that's most of them that we have.
Yeah.
And for Carrie, I'll throw this one to you about COVID. Has COVID-19, this is from Benjamin from Munster in the United States, has COVID-19 affected either the staff or animals this year?
Yeah, that's a huge question, and in short, immensely so. My heart goes out to all the folks who have been directly impacted. It's taken a toll on us all. We have had staff that have had it, have been exposed, who have had family members that have gone through the same situation, and we have really rallied to support those folks and cover their shifts. We did early on go to a semi-lockdown where as many people as possible worked from home, but obviously our animals need daily attention. And so we did have to have staff come in, and we instituted quite a number of protocols to keep both our staff and our animals safe. following the rules about maintaining the distancing as much as possible, wearing face masks, and moving to N95s when they became more available, and when we had situations where we did have to be close, because sometimes when you are working with animals, it does require people to be relatively in close proximity. And this was also especially important for our sea otters when we cared for sea otters. Sea otters are in the mustelid family, and both ferrets and minks are also in that family, and both of those species have been shown to be very sensitive and able to catch it from people. So we have been especially diligent when we are working with those animals. Does that about cover it? Do you think of any other measures we took, Lisa?
No, I think that covered it. I think we just, we absolutely reduced down to the bare minimum of what, what we could do just to make sure that we were maintaining animal welfare and staff safety. And aside from that, pretty much everything else, we shut down all animal tours. We've slowly started to implement them with a lot more safety precautions with them as well. But yeah, so it was definitely a do what we can to maintain animal welfare and keep our staff safe, and that was about where we were. And thankfully, we're starting to ease some of those things now.
Tara, can you remind us how long we were actually closed?
So we were closed to the public for just about 2 months, from mid-March until mid-May, and then we opened. The first couple of weeks were kind of test openings for members only. So we were first really open about Memorial Day weekend to the general public.
And
so
I
yes,
will
it's
just add,
been an interesting time.
Yeah, and I'll just add one final comment to that is that yes, we were all very in the whole world were impacted, but I will say that we are so incredibly fortunate being in Alaska. I think our population level, our population density really helped us avoid, I think, the crushing impact a lot of other places felt. So I was happy to be remote.
Very true. We feel very lucky being in Alaska. So I've got a question again from Barry in Sarasota. Lisa, I'll throw this one to start for you. Because I think our AZA accreditation is key to this. What you do is very similar to Marine Aquarium and Lab in Sarasota. What other aquariums and labs do you have relationships with, and are you accredited?
Yes, we are currently AZA accredited. We're actually getting ready to go through our annual accreditation process next March. And we collaborate with a lot of other facilities. Kind of based on where our need is and what might be going on at that time. We've collaborated with organizations for research projects, for animal care, for animal placement. We've had members from other facilities come up and offer assistance for us when we've been really just kind of really hit hard in a particular stranding season. As I mentioned earlier, the collaborative efforts for the beluga whale rehab was amazing, and so we worked with a lot of institutions that house belugas, and so had beluga whale, particularly beluga whale calf experience. We've had people come up and help us with otter pups. We've had people come up and visit for various research and aid in research projects. We work very closely with Long Marine Lab in Santa Cruz, who is actually the scientist, is the PI on that project for the Focus project. And so we have a lot of collaborative movement of staff from her lab up to help with that project up here. So yeah, we work with a lot of different organizations supporting our mission. Anything
Great,
else
and I've got a
Carrie?
question.
Oh,
I've got a question that will be great for both of you to answer, from Alexander from Mansfield. How did you get into this profession, and what advice do you have for people who would like to work with these animals? I've got a related question from Anthony, also from the United States, asking if you are Native Alaskan, and if not, how did your life events result in living and working in Alaska?
So I'll go first since Lisa just talked. So I grew up on the East Coast and, did visit aquarium growing up, zoos and aquariums, and they were very special. I also loved watching, the insurance companies, wonderful.
Omaha, Nebraska's Wild
Mutual
Kingdom.
Omaha's Wild Kingdom.
Yes, that one. So greatly inspired me. When I was in high school, I very seriously considered going to veterinary school, but ultimately decided to pursue engineering, in part because I thought that going to vet school was a lot of schooling. Well, kind of it's a little ironic. Ultimately, I did decide to switch gears and go back to veterinary medicine and pursue a veterinary degree after having worked as an engineer for about 7 years. It sounds like an odd leap for a lot of folks, but what appealed to me about engineering is what appeals to me about medicine. It's all about how things work. And in one case, it was electrical systems and radars, and now it's just about physiology. In terms of recommendations for folks looking to become veterinarians, I mean, look locally, get involved with local efforts, whether it's local veterinary practices or local zoos. Get involved with animal care at any level, and there are just so many opportunities locally. And then, of course, pursuing a variety of educational experiences that fit that. You do need to tackle some pretty tough courses, just fair warning, but the payoff is definitely worth it. That was a multi-part question. Maybe I'll let Lisa answer for herself.
Yeah, so to follow up a little bit what Carrie said about how to get into this field, hands down, seeking experience through high school, college, whether it's volunteering at your local shelter, just starting out walking dogs, anything that can show your interest and dedication to animal care and working in the industry speaks volumes on your resume as you even start to look for internships while you're in college. I have set in on countless interviews for both internship positions and job positions, and really we look at your level of dedication to the field, which means oftentimes working for free, which is tough to do for a lot of people. But most internships in this field are not paid, and so it's definitely something that is being talked about a lot now at this level, about trying to make those opportunities more available. But definitely volunteering and interning is a great way to get started. Just how I ended up here, and a little bit of my background is I moved to Seward when I was 8 years old. My parents were school teachers, and I have lived in this town almost my entire life. I did leave to go outside for college, and but did return and finished my degree at UAA, and happened to be finishing my degrees just as the SeaLife Center was opening. I actually had looked into potentially going into physical therapy school, doing a lot of therapy with animals, utilizing animals in therapeutic programs, and that's what kind of sparked my interest in working around marine mammals as well. And so led to me applying for a job down here, and here I am. So
thanks to you both. Just a couple acronyms. UAA is University of Alaska Anchorage, and we are about 2 to 2.5 hours from Anchorage on the Seward Highway, which is mostly 2-lane highway that connects us to the rest of Alaska. And then AZA is the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. I don't know if we defined that one before. That is the accrediting organization that we're a member of. I've got a question about Carrie, about your stethoscope. Does one use a regular stethoscope on sea mammals?
Yes, one does. You do have to be careful to either keep it dry or to really dry it out afterwards. Once it gets soaked, then it's no longer useful, but we try and keep it out of the water as much as possible.
Thanks, Carrie. Lisa, puffins. We've got a question from Emmy in Aurora, somewhere in the U.S. Tell us about your puffin collection.
Well, we have both horned puffin and tufted puffin species here at the SeaLife Center. A lot of people sometimes confuse our horned puffin with the Atlantic puffin. They're two separate species, so we want to make sure people understand that. Aside from us having them, is there anything specific? Any other specific questions you have on them? I mean, it's, I guess, you know,
What I always like to say about puffins is people come to the SeaLife Center thinking their favorite animal is going to be the Steller sea lion, and they tend to leave with their favorite animal being one of our puffins.
And that is very true. And I will say we have some very charismatic personalities with all of our animals, for sure. And I actually believe that was another question that I had seen was, you know, do the animals have personalities? Very much so. The birds definitely, especially some of the birds that are hand raised, have some very large personalities that interact with the staff very well. They participate in some of our encounter programs. We actually have a rhinoceros auklet named Klinger that I think every person that comes to the SeaLife Center and is a bird fan knows who Klinger is and always asks about Klinger and how he's doing. And, you know, will I see Klinger today? And he's definitely a favorite amongst all the staff here. So yeah, people very much enjoy watching them and just seeing how they interact with the other birds and the staff.
Carrie, any comments about animal personalities?
I just want to add that even some of the larger fish are known to have personalities. Our staff will talk about individual wolf eels. All of our octopus get individual names, and they're known to be more or less, you know, engaging, or sometimes one gets a reputation for being extra sneaky. So really there are personalities across all of our collection.
Great. Got a question from Carol in Durham. I'm assuming that's North Carolina in the US. For Lisa, how easy is it to train seals, and I'd say and sea lions, to respond to commands or learn tricks?
That's a great question. And it kind of comes back to personality and aptitude in each individual animal as well. But some animals pick up on training much quicker than others. And some animals or some behaviors that we look to train our animals can just be really challenging for some animals. You know, something that may seem super simple for us, getting an animal to do that is just, it's not a simple task for them to do. You know, like it's almost like telling a toddler that they need to sit still for 5 minutes before they can, you know, watch TV or get their treat. Just telling an animal to just sit, basically they call it an OR behavior, an orienting response, where they just sit calmly in the water or on the deck, make eye contact with their trainer. It seems very simple, but it takes a lot of trust and baby steps and build up to get there. And so that's just, you know, sounds like a really simple process, but, you know, to go all the way up to training an animal to go down to an underwater target and hold for maybe 2 minutes or 3 minutes and then come up and breathe in a dome is a much more complex behavior that takes so many more steps that may take months to train. Whereas some animals on a simple behavior, maybe presenting a flipper or opening their mouth so they can brush their teeth, they might be able to do that in a week or 2 weeks. But a lot of it will really depend on that animal and how quickly they've picked up on the training techniques that you're trying to get them to understand.
Thanks, Lisa. I've got a question that I'm going to take from Jack. With U.S. cruises to Alaska not happening this year, if travelers can get to Seward, will all hotels, restaurants, and your facility be open as you normally would be? So we have been open throughout the winter. Normally we're open 7 days a week. We've only been open 5 days a week just to make things easier on our staff. We plan to be open 7 days a week starting at least by May 1st, possibly earlier. We are doing timed ticket entry, which is really what all facilities like us have moved to, so that we can keep a little better handle on the number of people in the building at one time and make it safe for everyone. But what we did last summer and what we're planning to do this summer is we'll just expand our hours so that we can get people in. We are expecting Saturdays to be super busy, so if anyone's coming this summer, avoid Saturday if you can. But in general, in town this last summer, places were mostly open. We did have a little bit of a local a COVID blip in early July, and I know some of the restaurants ended up closing for a short period of time, but we're hoping this summer is relatively normal on land. And I know that the local boats, the local boat trips are also planning to go out. So everyone is just looking at how to manage the number of people and keep everyone safe. So I've got a question that is another one about connections with animals, and there's a fun one about what's your favorite animal. And this is from Sharon from Edinburgh in the UK. Do you have a particular favorite animal within the center? As keepers, do you find you really get to know them and form a bond with them?
Yeah, I'll start with that, and then if Carrie has anything she'd like to add. Yeah, absolutely. I think I heard it stated best by a particular individual on a show that we recorded this summer, and he said, they tell you to never develop a favorite or to never get attached to an animal that you're working with. And he's like, I fail every time. And it's pretty true. When you work with these animals every day, they become your coworkers, and you develop these special relationships and bonds with them. And so you can't help but become attached. And it's the way you're going to get further in their behavior training and get those really important data points that you might need for research. It's the way you're going to get them, is developing those bonds and developing that trust and getting these animals to perform at these top research levels to get, both for research, for animal care, for vet practices. That's how we become, good caretakers and look out for the best welfare for these animals. I would say that everyone kind of gets into your heart for different reasons. Some, it might be that they're quick to pick up on something. Some might be like, oh my gosh, they're being so stubborn today. Or some might be, you know what, otters are notorious for just getting into mischief and smart and almost outsmarting their trainers sometimes, to the point where it can be frustrating, but then yet comical in some ways. And so, I mean, we've had so many situations with otters here that we have literally almost beat our head against the wall. Like, how did they figure that out? How did they do that? How did they escape from there? How did they end up there? And so we've had more, more learning experiences from those guys than I'd say any other animal here. But yeah, they're very charismatic and big personalities, and it's really easy when you work with them on a daily basis to get pretty attached to them.
So for me as a vet, it's kind of interesting how, the healthier an animal is, the less time I spend with it. So the ones that I tend to bond with are ones that have been quite ill and that I'm working with on a daily basis. And one of the more recent cases was the beluga calf Tyonek, and it was quite rewarding to spend all that time with him, see him get better, and also see him relate to us and look to us for comfort and various things. There was one time I was just doing some observations on his breathing, and I was sitting at the side of the pool with my feet in the water, and somebody nearby dropped something and made this big clang, and it startled him, and he had been swimming in the far corner of the pool, and he took a beeline right over to where I was sitting and was trying to like hide underneath my feet. It was very, very interesting. It was very rewarding. But then as they get better, I tend to see less and less of them. Even so, it is, it's always interesting to work with the different animals, and and sometimes they work well when I show up, and that's great, and other times they're having an off day, and you just have to take that into account and work with the animals on their own terms, especially our long-term residents. But it is one of the things that makes the job rewarding, having that opportunity to really connect.
Thanks, Carrie. I've got a question I'm going to send to both of you, starting with Lisa. From Kevin: how do you help your staff with the loss of a past animal after such bonding that goes on with their care over time?
Oh, that's a great question. And that's going to all depend on the individual, and a lot of it also depends on the circumstance behind the death. We have certainly dealt with death for multiple reasons, here. Some it's a long-term illness, some it may be something that a condition we've been treating and kind of knew that this animal may be predisposed to long-term complications. And then of course there are the deaths that you just don't see coming, that are, that really blindside you. And, all of them is basically letting, our team have that opportunity to grieve, and then, trying to work through, with each unique situation, what was, the surrounding events behind it, and talk through it. And then, hopefully we do get further answers once we do a complete necropsy. We are very unique up here that just every animal that dies here, we do perform a necropsy to try to find, what exactly the cause was. Sometimes we get really concrete, clear answers, and sometimes we don't. And, just trying to be available for the team and give them the support that they need. And, really a lot of it comes down to, most circumstances, it was, we did the best we could and all we could for this animal. And this was its time. And, sometimes we have to make that call as caregivers. Sometimes we have to, there is no getting better. And the best course of action for this animal is to humanely euthanize. And we've had that with several of our sea lions here. So, yeah, it's never an easy process, no matter how much you work with animals and know that death is part of it. It's always challenging.
So for my part, I do try to let folks know as much as possible what the status of an animal is, and if especially if it's a chronic condition or with rehab animals that come in, I do try to make sure that people understand, well, this animal has come in severely compromised. It may well die overnight, just to help prepare people. I also do try to communicate as much as possible after the fact, as we find more things out about the animal. It can be challenging dealing with the death of an animal, and at the same time, for my staff, we often very quickly launch into the post-mortem, and so we kind of have to delay a little bit of the grieving process. But I do think it's very important to acknowledge what an important part these different animals play in all of our lives, and to recognize that there is grief after the loss. And we do, there are a couple things that we do try to make sure happen, that everybody who's worked with the animal to reach out as soon as possible, so that they aren't blindsided by the news from somebody who might not be able to put it, to tell the whole story. We'll also come together and have some sessions to talk about how people are doing, and to be able to answer more of the questions as to what happened.
Thanks to you both. I've got some related questions about plastics in the oceans, and I thought, Lisa, you might want to talk a little bit about Zippy. From Thomas, does ocean pollution, especially that from discarded plastics, present a challenge to Alaska's sea life? And from Diana in Reading, the UK, how much of a problem is plastic in the oceans to the Alaskan wildlife now?
Thanks for the great lead in, Tara, on the Zippy case. Can definitely talk about that, and then talk a little bit more about the greater plastic pollution problem. So Zippy was a northern sea otter that was reported to our wildlife response team, I'd say probably in, what was it, early January, February last year. It was about a year ago, about exactly a year ago, and we monitored him for quite some time and tracked him. But at the point, and what we had noticed, or what the report was, that he had a pink zip tie around his paw, but at that point he was a very large, robust, otherwise looked healthy animal, and we'd see him and we couldn't get close to him. We couldn't get a net on him. We couldn't get him in to try to just cut our initial plan was like, if we can just get him netted, get a quick pair of, scissors on it, cut it off, we'll just let him go. But as time went on, his body condition deteriorated. We could see that the zip tie was embedding further into his paw, and it was clearly compromising his ability to dive and forage. And as we were getting further reports, his body he was much thinner, weaker. Anyway, after months of tracking him, we were finally able to, after a really amazing attempt to get our hands on him, we were able to get him into our care. And, Dr. Carrie and her team did some great research on bone infection, because it had created a bone, all the way down to the, embedded and all the way down and impacted his bone. But he made a remarkable recovery after only being here with us about 6 weeks. And we were able to release him, and we still have reports of him out foraging in the bay and in the harbor and seeing him. It was a result of plastic in our oceans. So as far as, we are part of a larger group. Actually, Tara, what is it? The aquarium, what is the group through AZA?
Aquarium Conservation Partnership
that does a lot of awareness for plastic debris, plastic garbage, reducing your use of plastics, that we've taken part in the last several years. And there was actually an effort here from a local grassroots group as well to get plastic bags, taken out of our grocery stores and, not used. And so there's definitely an awareness about keeping our oceans clean up here. But we definitely don't see that garbage debris coming up on our beaches and like you do in a lot of other highly populated areas. So right now, whether it's staying out, further away that we're not seeing, but I feel like we're very fortunate at this point right now that we're not seeing a lot of garbage. I mean, it's there for sure, but it's not, and it definitely increases with our seasons, with our more, more people in the area. But we can also, this conversation could go on for a long time, as well as we could go into like the microbeads and the microbeads that they're finding in a lot of products that they've now tried to start to remove, that we're finding ingested in a lot of bird stomachs, and even, just the plastic debris in all marine animal stomachs, upon necropsy. So it's definitely a very large problem that we as people that work in this industry are facing and think about every day, about what small changes can we make and what small messages can we share with our followers and guests to try to reduce that impact to our oceans.
Thanks, Lisa. And I'm going to try to squeeze a few more questions, and we're running out of time, but we've still got a few questions. Got a few from Sean in California and Carrie in Petersfield, UK, about whales. Yes, if you anyone cruising Alaska waters is going to see whales. Just taking a day cruise out of Seward. In June, orcas are it's kind of the biggest month for orcas. You see humpbacks. Every time I've been out, I've seen a humpback. Sometimes you'll see Dall's porpoise out there, sea lions, harbor seals. are pretty much, you can walk along the shore here in Seward and see a lot of those animals as well. So there are a lot. And there, in terms of migrating whales, the humpbacks we have up here in the summer winter in Hawaii. So we tend to, Alaskans tend to also winter in Hawaii, so the whales do as well. So there's a question that I'd like to throw to one of you, Lisa or Carrie, about human-animal interactions. Mark from the US mentioned great white sharks with swimmers and surfers, lobster pot lines. Obviously, we don't have a lot of swimmers and surfers in the water, but what sorts of human-animal interaction challenges are you familiar with up here?
So I take that one?
Sure, Carrie.
Well, there are fisheries interactions, sea otters in the southeast, as well as I think it's sperm whales with longline depredation in southeast, and a lot of work does go into minimizing those types of interactions. Of course, we and others put out a lot of essentially public service announcement, PSAs, asking people not to feed wildlife, whether it's otters or seals or sea lions, any species. It tends not to do well for the animal, first of all, not necessarily feeding them an appropriate diet, but then it can also make them look more and more for food from people, which they can get very aggressive, and ultimately they will have to be removed from the situation either physically or permanently. And that is kind of part of the reason why sea otter pups that come to us, why we don't release them, because they have such intensive care and we're feeding them. It's not possible to separate people from food, and so they will always look to people for food. And unlike with seals, it's a very short care period, and we very quickly remove ourselves from that equation. So we are able to release them so that they don't become nuisance animals. Trying to think, were there other aspects of the question?
I think that's great, Carrie. Absolutely great. The question from Susan in the U.S. from Atlanta. I understand that Resurrection Bay and other Alaskan cities suffered tsunamis. There was a major tsunami in 1964 that hit Seward very bad and wiped out most of the waterfront. Lisa, what have you done to prepare the center if it comes again? I want to add, this is what Susan says, also, I pray it doesn't.
Right. Well, thanks. We do too. You know, we clearly we are right on the water, and if the event like the 64 quake and tsunami were to happen, we are very vulnerable. But we do have a lot of safety protocols in place for at least animal and human safety, and a lot of it depends on whether we get a warning, an advisory, whether it's imminent. If we have time, we will certainly try to kennel up animals and get them to higher ground. But if it's imminent and we don't have time, it is secure the animals where they are and get staff to safety. So we drill on tsunami and earthquake evacuation annually, so staff know where to go and staff know where to be. I will say that our tsunami warning system has had its challenges in recent times as to what is the accurate warning we should be receiving. So it's made it our steps for what we need to do a little challenging in teasing out the real information with maybe some mistakes. So, but we, our utmost, value is staff safety. So we make sure staff is taken care of.
Thanks, Lisa. And I think this is going to be the final one from Constance in Las Vegas. How is money raised to benefit Alaska animals, and how is the opportunity to help marketed to various folks? I think you all probably know quite a few of the ways that works, even though you're not always involved on the front lines. Carrie, what?
I figured you were going to take that, Tara.
I thought you were going to take that. Well, we get money from a variety of sources. First of all, we do charge an admission. We do have a number of grants that not only fund research, but also animal care. And then, of course, there are donations from individuals such as listeners here, but also corporations, large and small, including many of the oil industries here in Alaska, as well as other seafood producers. We did just have our fundraising gala last night, which I think the link is available now. And also, if you go on our webpage, there are buttons to donate on a couple of pages. And then, there are a number of other events that we hold throughout the year. Hopefully this next year we'll be able to get back to some of the in-person ones, but we have some local local cultural events and host people that come in for evening events, as well as a fun run, and we'll hopefully be able to get back to some of those the more active ones this next upcoming year. Did I leave any major source out?
That was great, Carrie. I would also mention that our social media is a great place to find out about those types of things. And there is a link to the gala that we did. It was an hour-long virtual program, and it is open for anyone to watch now, either on our YouTube page or our Facebook page. We have an amazing videographer. You saw some of her work in the first 20 minutes or so of this program today. She has a lot of videos out there, both on Facebook and YouTube, and probably some other social media channels that I don't use as much, Instagram and that sort of thing. So we really appreciate everyone's support. And yes, when people visit us, Carrie, when people visit us, that's actually helping the animals. That your ticket helps take care of the animals that we have here. So I think that's all we have time for. I'm sorry to a few people that we didn't get to all the questions. I still have 9 of them sitting here that I wanted to get to, but really appreciate all the wonderful questions today. And thanks to Lisa Hartman and Dr. Carrie Goertz for doing such a fantastic job answering questions. And for all of you at home, hopefully we'll see you in the future.